my name is Noor. I am getting a dual degree in physiology and neurobiology and human rights, and my career goals are eventually to go to medical school, but taking a year off to work before that. BOLD is a program that I was so fortunate to stumble upon during undergrad. It is really a community just full of love, empathy, and women that uplift each other. We uplift each other to continue pushing in the face of obstacles, to convince and remind each other that we are capable. And it's really created a community full of support in a time that is full of obstacles and changing conditions. So it's been a good constant. So I would choose the word growth because it was growth in so many different domains. It was emotional growth, intellectual growth, community growth. We really, like I said, we built this community out of nothing. And it's challenged me and intellectually stimulating me to push past what I thought was possible. And emotional, at the end of the day, we were able to develop our sense of identity and really take an introspective look at ourselves. You are capable. You're more capable than you realize. You're more capable than people have made you believe. For example, women on average only apply to positions they're 100% qualified for. Men, on the other hand, apply to positions they're only 70 to 80% qualified for. And so imposter syndrome, to whatever degree that applies to you, it's fake. Or if it feels real to you, it's been curated. So reject that, remind yourself that you are capable, you can do it. And specifically as a woman, to lean into the things you were taught were weaknesses. So we were taught that to achieve true equality, you can have a man's position if you were to take a man's qualities, right? Confidence, dominate, be bossy, but to lean into your femininity and use those as strengths. Lean into what defines your womanhood. Yeah, so I would say it's a really unique opportunity for you to bridge together the theoretical and the practical. When you're in your undergraduate degree, you're taking all these courses and you're seeing things in their theoretical application, but BOLD gives you an opportunity to apply them to a real situation in a way that doesn't feel like you're wasting time on indulging in your passions, right? We always want to take time and invest in community and do the things that we want to do, but we feel like we can't when we have deadlines or we have to add to our resume. So it's really a great opportunity to knock two birds with one stone. And because of that, my advice to you is to really think hard about what you are passionate about and what you actually care about. Not what you've told yourself you care about, not what you think your major should make you care about, your family or anybody around you, but to really look at yourself and think, what can I keep working on even when they get hard? So my project was, in short, the pursuit of a Middle Eastern cultural center on campus. Currently, there isn't one. The closest thing to it is an Asian American student cultural center, which geographically the Middle East falls under, but culturally and identity-wise, we don't really feel like we belong. So it had two components. It had a research component and an advocacy implementation component. So in the research component, I conducted qualitative, in-depth interviews with Middle Eastern identifying students to figure out what the inadequacies were, what the gaps were, and how a cultural center could potentially fill them. And then the second half was taking all the data that I collected and applying them, working with administration, building an advocacy movement, and getting this thing off the ground. Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to have a couple of concrete outcomes even in the face of COVID. So I was able to conduct all my interviews virtually, so I have a good chunk of qualitative data. Also, from every participant that I interviewed, I asked them for a piece of home, right, a piece of their cultural identity that I compiled into a mural. So that mural is going to be hung in the Student Union next to the Asian American Cultural Center as kind of a symbol for what's to come. So hopefully in the future there will be a Middle Eastern Cultural Center there, but it was a really great montage of all the participants that I was able to interview, and they gave me a piece of themselves, so it feels good to have a piece of their identity as well. I was also able to really get the movement off the ground, which is really phenomenal and more than I anticipated. We are currently in the process of drafting a proposal for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion with more concrete plans. So budgeting, how it will be staffed, who will staff it, what kind of hours, and what kind of hybrid model we want for an academic and cultural component of this center, which none of the other cultural centers do at the moment. So yeah, it's been getting off the ground. It's moving its way through admin, which we are very grateful for. So first, I had this roommate, her name is Flo, and she is Filipino-American, and she frequented ASAC, the Asian American Student Cultural Center, very often. And I saw her experiences from when she was a freshman, and it really created this sense of community that I didn't realize I was yearning for until I saw it in somebody else. And it felt like the resources on campus were serving her, and they were serving others like her. But I realized that I was missing that. So that's kind of what initially got me started. And just growing up as a first-generation Middle Eastern immigrant, you have that pull between your American identity and whatever else you are. So I was too Lebanese to be American, and I was too American to be Lebanese. And so my personal experience, plus realizing there was a need for it at a university and that I could serve others that were feeling the same as me, was kind of what inspired the project. So I had this really vivid image in my head of a prospective student, and I'm a WOW leader, so I usually take the freshmen around campus, and I'm showing them the cultural centers, and I'm describing to them the resources available to them. But I had this really vivid image in my head of a Middle Eastern student touring UConn and realizing that there was a space for them, and feeling like that could solidify their decision, and then throughout their 4 years to see them grow in that community and discover parts of themselves that they didn't even know were there. That image was what was driving me. Yeah, so the pandemic really messed up my plans, and there was a point in time that I thought I was going to have no outcomes, nothing to show for it. First and foremost, I lost my advisor. So I had an advisor in the higher education department who had a focus on international students and different identifying backgrounds, who was my mentor, and he was going to be great. And kind of COVID hit, and you don't have as much room on your plate for things when you're working from home. So I lost my mentor midway through my project and had to scramble to find somebody else to continue advising me. So that was big hurdle number one. Because of COVID changing regulations, I was getting a lot of IRB rejections. So that's the ethics review board that approves any human subject research. So I kept getting rejections, which meant I couldn't start my interviews until after my project was supposed to be completed. So I'm actually still working on my project, even though it was supposed to be completed over the summer because of all of those IRB rejections. And then also networking just became so much more difficult. When you're building an advocacy movement, there's less rules to what you have to do to accomplish your goal. It's kind of feeling the waters and seeing who can help you accomplish which goal. And so if you're not in person, I can't just roll into an office of an admin member and kind of give my pitch. I have to organize Zoom meetings and schedule weeks in advance. So it made it more difficult to do those things that were on a whim, but we made it work in the end. Bold has taught me that in any event, preserve your humanity, because that's what is propelling you to do the work that you're doing, right? We're working despite COVID, not working in the time of COVID. So we're kind of figuring out how to manage the situation, and even the failures, that's still teaching you something, that's still affecting your project somehow. And so really to indulge in those parts of it, even the parts that don't feel so good, and to know that it's all part of the experience. So while I've grown in a lot of ways, academically, emotionally, I would say mostly my identity has changed, right? I always knew I identified as Lebanese American. My parents immigrated right before I was born. But like I said, you had that pull between American and Lebanese. You're never 100% of anything. And this has allowed me to really indulge in the parts of myself that I had set aside, or that I wasn't even really sure of by the time I got to college. So to navigate my identity, to really solidify things that I thought were gate-kept by people that were more Middle Eastern than me, right? To let yourself be wherever you are on that spectrum and to be okay with it. So I'd say it was a really good chance to practice taking ownership of things. So until this point in my undergraduate career, and I think in many other students' at this point of their senior year, are collaborating on a lot of projects. Maybe you're doing internships or you've worked, but it's always in a team where there's somebody else that takes the fall if something goes wrong. But this was the first chance I had to realize that everything reflected on me or my colleague, Mateen, who was helping me the most, in a way that kind of changed how I went about leadership. So first, establish trust in the people you're working with. First, establish these relationships that are transcending your goal, and then you can get to work. And take ownership at the end of the day. Even the failures, those were mine. Yeah, so I had sent out an email to a lot of the Middle Eastern identifying students through a listserv, through some student orgs that were focused on Middle Eastern culture, to get participants for my qualitative data, at which point Mateen had actually emailed me back. I didn't really know that he was interested in working on this project or that he had spent any time on it at all, but in our first meeting, and of course it was a Zoom meeting, I remember being overcome by the fact that somebody else cared as much as I did, right? It felt like I was the only one in a sea of all these people that, okay, I'm Middle Eastern, yeah, I wish there was something, but I'm not gonna do anything about it. What can I do, right? It's me against all the administration that has the power and the money. But it was really great to feel like somebody shared that drive with me, and to realize that there was somebody else to share the work with at that point. That's when we started collaborating, and moving forward, things felt much more manageable. So many people helped me through this. I have so many people to thank, and it wouldn't have been possible alone. The other fellow Bold Scholars really helped me realize that I wasn't alone in my feelings of inadequacy or all the obstacles I was facing with COVID, so they provided some good emotional and moral support. Liza, of course, was incredible. She never treated us like just scholars, right? We were humans first and foremost, and so if there was something else that was bothering us, that would come first, and that really helped me preserve my humanity in the midst of all of this. My new mentor after my other one kind of fell through. He was really great to pick up a project halfway through, which was really unexpected. And Mateen, my colleague, another Middle Eastern identifying senior who was doing this work as part of his senior thesis. We kind of ended up collaborating on a lot of this, and have him to thank for a lot of the progress we made. And then Angela Rolla, specifically, I want to shout out. She is the director of the Asian American Student Cultural Center. She's been really kind in pushing this movement forward, especially because she realized ASAC wasn't serving students in a way that she had hoped, but she was always offering us funding, if possible, programming, space, and she was really supportive of our mission.